Every photographer who comes to my class, almost every photographer at some point, says they want to be a great landscape photographer. And why is that? Well, it's because there is a mystery to the landscape image. There is something that makes us cling to it or want to go to it. There is a reason why we are drawn to these images, more so than perhaps other images. There's something exotic in the landscape format, in the idea of capturing a moment of grandeur or majesty, or a moment that'll never pass this way again. It's something exotic. It takes us out of our comfort zone or out of where we are right now and transcends us into a different area. We want to see, we want to live in those saturated colors, those vibrant skies and the beautiful flowers and things like that. It may not be exactly what we saw when we were there, but in the still photograph, the two-dimensional realm, it becomes much more vivid, much more lively, and much more attractive than perhaps than it was in real life. So landscape photography is really something unique. And again, of course, to be a good landscape photographer, it's usually not what you put into it, it's what you leave out. Like, for instance, this photograph that I shot up here in the top is the Kauai watershed. Now, to me, this photograph up here is very bland. It didn't quite work. It's a nice clear day. You can see the snow-capped mountains that are about 40 miles away. Quite nice. But if I move my camera angle only about, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet over, I capture this dead tree on the side, which gives me a graphic lead-in to the distance or the distant snow-capped mountains. It also gives me an incongruous element in that the snow is the promise of moisture in the future as it melts, but it will do the tree in the foreground no good. And the reader connects with this subliminally. So it makes a mediocre shot look a little bit better. It's still not a great image, but it helps it just by moving the camera just a little bit. So landscape photography really depends on a variety of different things. It depends on the design of the image, the shapes, the lines, the horizons, the visual harmony that we will get when we put all of these things together. It's really the elements of composition again that are coming back. It also is the light. The longer the shadows, make the more dramatic use of the light, and then know what your light meter is telling you. Again, I've said before, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., great time for landscapes. 10 to 3, dead time, use it for scouting. 4 to 7, or whenever sundown is your time to be shooting with long shadows and dramatic designs. It really does help you. Steady the camera, whatever it takes. Great tripod, but if you don't have a tripod, and I've been in lots of positions where you don't have a tripod, so use the hood of a car, cement, a tabletop, lampstand, whatever it takes. As long as you're going to be in marginal light most of the time when you're shooting landscape photography, 9 times out of 10, because it's going to be late in the day or earlier in the day. So you're going to need to steady that camera as best you can, because you can have long exposures, because you want maximum depth of field, because you want everything sharp. So you're down at 16, f22, deep into the pool, so you're going to have 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 second exposures. You have to steady that camera. There's no hand holding when it comes to landscape photography. You must be patient. You got to wait for the moment. You got to wait for the skies, wait for the sun, wait for the birds, wait for the people. You got to wait for whatever it takes in your graphic element to make it a good picture. So you must be patient above all. And then you have to use a simple tool called a neutral density gradient filter. It's good to have in your bag, and it can't be understated how important it is in the pursuit of great landscape photography. This picture here of Half Dome, shaken from Glacier Point, is not possible without a neutral density gradient filter. And you see it in use here down in the lower end picture. It is a piece of plastic that goes on the front of your camera, and it allows you to place that horizon line here, this break in the gradient filter right here, in a position of the picture so that you can get 2 separate exposures on one digital image. So in other words, my line of demarcation right here with the neutral density filter would be right about here. That way I could expose for the shadows down here, and which is a lower exposure, and still capture the alpenglow up here in Half Dome and the sky all in one picture, and have something worthy of making a picture out of it. So all these great photographs you see with this great shadow, and then you see the sun here, You know, if you take this with a normal raw camera without a neutral density filter, you're not going to get the same result. It's just not going to work. It's not going to be as dramatic. But with a neutral density filter, all things are possible. So you see these great landscape photographs like this? Here's their secret. This is what they use. Same thing with this one. Now this is a panorama. This is 3 separate images put together in the middle of a storm, okay? And it's a 1.2 stop underexposure to dramatize the clouds, okay? But my neutral density filter fits right in here along the horizon line. This is one exposure, this is another exposure. And of course I have the bright sun shining right in my camera, and we all know what that happens and does to a digital camera. It skews the sensor and makes it really screwed up. So without the neutral density filter, this picture again is just not possible. Now landscapes don't have to be mountains and trees and oceans and things like that. They can be non-traditional, like this picture I shot in a parking lot in Denver. I just saw these clouds floating by and I thought, well, this looks kind of weird. And the graphic element of the pole coming up, I thought, yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. And then when I got into Photoshop, I sharpened it really heavily to give those clouds that really definite texture, and it becomes a non-traditional landscape. Also, landscapes don't have to be grandeur. Sometimes they can be specific elements of a picture, like this one. This is a very unique landscape style photograph in the fact that it is the detail of the snow. And again, this was just a grab shot. It was very low light, but it was in the snow. It was colder than heck, matter of fact. And I think if I remember right, I'm balancing this on the top of a car. No tripod involved, just on the top of the car, trying to keep it steady so I can shoot this at like an 1/8 of a second or a 1/4 of a second or something like that at f/22, so that I get a maximum amount of detail all the way through from the front edge of the limb to the back. Also, different types of light can create different landscape situations, like fog. Most people, we get fog in the valley, everybody puts their cameras away and they go sit by the fire and read a book. A photographer, you should be out in the fog, because the fog is really, really cool. It is great light and gives us more saturated colors, and you can create unique and almost surreal landscapes in the fog. And you've got to be careful. You've got to watch out for your exposure and not be fooled by the fact that it's more contrasty than you might think. Now, I shot this in color, but if I'd done this in black and white, I'd have to be more careful of the contrast levels within the two. But it can create a very unique image. Same thing with colors that are oversaturated or very, very vibrant in nature. This is pretty close to what this thing was when I shot it. This creek up in Mendocino was extremely overgrown. Matter of fact, this photograph was taken less than probably 500 yards from the previous photograph, believe it or not, on the same day. So this is a foggy day as well, but you see that the fog has created the saturation of the greens and the log and the trees and the water. Okay, and that's what fog does for us. It is a natural diffusion blanket over the earth that creates a diffused light that is the very best for saturated colors. So when I say that the light in foggy days are good for shooting, it's good for saturation. Now you have to work it out and search for it, but it's great for landscape photography. Foreground and perspective are extremely important, like this photograph here from Montana de Oro. Thank goodness for this guy with a red sweater out there fishing. If I didn't have him, I wouldn't have a shot. That is, in compositional terms, my spot. But this is utilizing of a very super wide-angle lens, a 20mm lens, that gives us this broad perspective. That guy is not really as far out there as he looks, but because of the super wide-angle lens, the foreground is accentuated and the distance is de-emphasized. And then with the clouds coming in and the white water and everything else, the photograph just seems to fit. Then with my line and design of the fissure going right through the middle, not the fisherman, but the fissure right through here, it tends to solidify the image and give it a thrust or a focal point towards the man in the red sweater. This is looking for compositional designs within the photograph, lines, forms, shapes. Very, very important, especially in landscape photography. And again, when you study the work of Ansel Adams and things like that, you'll see these type of things come up and view them quite easily. Now, landscapes can also be mechanical in nature. This is Air Force One at the Reagan Museum down in Simi Valley. I was walking around. I wasn't coming up with any good shots that day. I was really kind of disgusted with myself. And I walked underneath this thing, looked up, saw this wonderful reflection, these great windows. Now this exposure is a little trickier than it might look. I had to calculate the exposure for the windows here to get the sky right, and then I had to underexpose these things, and when I did that, these lines emerged to give, again, a focal point thrust coming down into this area that gives it a graphic design nature to the photograph. And it's a matter of combination of lens, angle, exposure, light, and timing that make it work. Now, using long exposures at night is very popular right now on the internet. You see lots of pictures like that. This photograph is from New Zealand, and chances are this guy is using some spot flash to illuminate the flowers here and stuff in the sky. I don't know. This could be a composite image. It's obviously a long exposure by the look of the clouds and the movement. You got a little bit of wind, as you can see back over here. So I'm not sure exactly how this photograph is obtained. I don't have any information on it. But this type of landscape right now on the internet is extremely popular. But it does take a lot of work. This is not something you just go out, point your camera, and shoot and walk away. And it's not it. This is tripod time, long exposure, probably a lot of work in the computer to make this one work. Now, traditional black and white is not left out either. Now, this obviously was with Ansel Adams and many other of the West Coast tradition, as they call it, shooting landscape photography. And black and white still has its place in landscape photography. Black and white definitely is still king in documentary photography, but in landscape, it still has a very significant place. And you'll see lots of photographers utilizing the digital photography, but shooting in black and white. And you'll also see photographs in black and white that could naturally be color, but again, are not of the grandeur nature like this, but are of a more intensive look at how this world works. Because that's really what you're photographing when you go out and shoot landscape. You're not worried about people and expressions and emphasis, faces, and all that other stuff. You're really working with nature's elements. And what that calls for is being in the right time and the right place. So why do we connect with landscape photography? It's really pretty simple, actually. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. We can't go outside with seeing some type of landscape. Now, it may be a landscape that we don't care about, but I mean, here in the valley, we're really lucky. Go 5 miles west and you're confronted with the beautiful Sierras. And, you know, I mean, we take it for granted, but, you know, there are people in the United States who kill for that view every day. We are drawn to the light and texture of all visual stimuli we see. And that visual stimuli, lots of times, is accentuated in landscape photographies, especially the textural nature. And that's what transcends us into another area. It brings us a sense of the exotic, of the, gee, I want to be there. I want to see that. I mean, travel photography is a great example of this, of utilizing landscape photography to accentuate a need to be there. But we look at any landscape and we consider it to be exotic. It freezes the moment of existence that transports us to another place. It's like, you know, like calendar art. You know, you see that picture and you look at it all month, and, you know, that reoccurring thought, it shows us the majesty of the world we live in. And it is majestic. From the mountains to the seas, to the fields we live in, to the crops that we live in, to the flower on the hillside. Above all, it is that challenges us to take a second look at everything around us, and to be corny, to slow down and smell the roses. And that's really what landscape is all about. Now, I'm a documentary photographer, that's what I do, but you know what? I love to put my cameras in the car, full tank of gas, take off, and go find landscape photography. To me, that's almost a perfect day. What's down that road? What's over that hill? What can I find? Hey, come join me on that someday. That's a great way to spend a day.